beside you, so close that I could go through. I'm carried to a time where I should never go. Silence all around me. The house is dark and all I see is memories and trophies and things that I don't need. All around there's more remains of times before. I will find myself once more, facing what's inside me. So close that I could fall through. I see the way just like you. So I'll stay here and try to believe there's something more. All around there's more remains of times before. I find myself once more, facing what's inside me. Of all I hate the most is the burden of your ghost. They won't get to me now. No one can find me. All around there's more remains of lives before. I will find myself once more and face what's inside me. Of all I hate the most is the burden of the ghosts. They won't get to me now. No one can find me.
That's George Millette. That is a new song that we've got coming out. It's called All Around There's More. That's part one. That's a an acoustic version of the song. George is a multi instrumentalist. He hails from Brighton, Ontario. Sean probably knows where that is, and he's got a beautiful home studio. I'm gonna flash that up on the screen here for you right now, so you could just see this. This is a cool studio. I want Sean to comment on this, but this guy built this studio from the basement. He tore everything apart in this basement of this house. This guy is like an amazing dude. He's not only a great musician and producer, but he also like does cool home rentals. And you got to see what he did here with this house. It's absolutely amazing. So I'm going to share the screen here on Facebook, and I'll pop that up there for you. And we have to switch it around. Here it is. There he is sitting in his home studio there, and that is one cool part of the studio. He's actually got another part of the live room where his drum kit sits. He's actually a drummer by trade, so another thing that he'd have in common with Sean. And we're going to talk about that and a whole bunch more stuff tonight on the show. And I want to kind of get to things here really quick, but we're trying to broadcast live on Instagram tonight, so you might be able to watch us on Instagram as well. Hopefully this works really well because we want to broadcast live there in future. It's a weird setup. That's all I'm going to say right now, and I'll maybe talk about it a little bit later. And I'm going to stop the screen sharing here and pop me back up on the screen. And we're going to talk about songwriting. Now, there was a post that Sean put out on it on his profile on Facebook a while back. I'm going to say within the last week. There's so much stuff that he's promoting these days. I think he's, aside from being busy as a musician, he's certainly busy doing an awful lot of promotion, and he's active in his music scene on the East Coast, and he plays live there as well. And so he not only knows what's going on out there, but he's working in the trenches as well. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce my co-host with the most on the East Coast, Sean McKenna from the podcast Bar Stools and Band Talk Rimshots with Sean.
Howdy ho.
Hey, brother. Good to have you here tonight, man.
Good to be anywhere.
I'm glad you're doing this show with me. You have added so much value to this show.
Well, thank you. I just try to do what I do. It's I had this conversation with somebody today. I Everything that I kind of post or impart or talk about is stuff that I glean from other people. It's not me. It's not me sitting around, coming up with thoughts that are brilliant. If there's one thing that I'm good at, it's finding somebody that knows what they're doing and listening to them. And I just felt the need today to remind some people of that because every now and again, I hear from people saying, "Oh, well, this person thinks you're getting a little too high and mighty," and it's not the case at all because nothing could be further from the truth.
I love it when you and I, banter, and I call it banter to some degree because we do banter things around. You and I don't always agree with the same things. We don't have the same point of view, and I think that's what makes things interesting about the conversations we have, because we play different sides. I mean, if we were like anything else, would be called three sides of the coin, right?
Well, yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that because Michael had a wonderful post this week about the 11 truths of music, and
Yes.
there's some pretty brutal ones on there, and I
Oh,
had some people that didn't agree with a couple of them, and I had some personally I don't agree with, but my my disagreements aren't. See, here's the thing for me, and straight up, if somebody has done something that I haven't done, then that makes them somebody that I need to listen to if I want to do what they've done, if that makes sense.
right, right.
So if I'm having a beer and getting ready to go on and play a show at one of our local bars, and there's a musician there that's going to do the same thing the next night or the next week, and he's sitting there giving me all the lay of the land, well, it's like we're not to sound too callous, but we're at the same level. And if I want to get higher than that, I want to listen to somebody that's doing higher things. And that's not to say that I don't value what they're
Right,
saying.
right.
Where I kind of draw the line, though, is my personal goals, and where, if somebody is doing something that maybe I want to do, but they're also doing it in a way that I don't want to do it, well, then
Sure.
I kind of, draw the line there, and that's where I'll go. Well, I don't agree with that. I'm not saying it's not true, but then other people, no, it's dumb. Well, it might be dumb, but this is, if you want to kind of hit those triggers or those markers, here's somebody that's done it. Wouldn't it make sense to listen? So I'm kind of a
Sure.
complicated soul when it comes to that, but that's just kind of the way my mind thinks, right?
Yeah, I mean, like when I was thinking about like that song we were playing tonight by George Millette, that was a song that he wrote in a really low part of his life. There's a part of it where he almost has that sound of there's almost a bit of McCartney in his voice in that song.
Yeah.
When I listened to it. And he told me, he said he wasn't sure whether he was actually wanted to share the song with publicly because it was about something he wrote at a time when he felt really low in life. And I said, it could be an inspiration to other people who've had those similar struggles.
Well, see, that's an interesting thing, right? In this whole age of mental health and what have you, I mean, that used to be a topic that you didn't bring up because it was
Yeah.
like it was a sign
Yeah.
of weakness or whatever. And now people are good bringing it up, and they should be good bringing it up because it's like, if you've got those issues taking place, you need to talk to somebody about it. So for him to do that, I think is great because you're right. I
Well,
mean, somebody might be going through a similar thing.
Well, I got a mission for you, and maybe you can help me figure out how we could get this to happen. But I would like to see his song parts 1 and 2 be part of Mental Health Week.
Yeah. I mean,
I mean, it would be so cool because the two songs are very, very different. One, I actually tried to get him to go sort of to an obscure point of view in terms of naming the songs. Instead of calling the song, we were going to call the song exactly what it was, All Around There's More.
mhm.
But instead, I wanted him to call this version Dreamscape
Mhm.
because it has sort of a dreamy feel to it. It's almost like he's dreaming all of this.
Mental health week, I do believe passed. I think Bell's going to
Yeah,
be, but those are types of things that you have to literally a year out. You got to start
yeah.
kind
Well,
of
that's what I'm
bugging them.
saying. Like for the next mental health week, like maybe
Yeah.
try and get somebody willing to play the song for some events.
Yeah.
I'm actually even thinking about. I know a few artists that speak at Recovery Week. You know what Recovery Week is for, right? Yeah.
Yep.
And so maybe we might be able to have like there's recovery breakfasts and stuff like that. Maybe they'd be willing to play one of his songs at a recovery breakfast.
Yeah, I'm sure they would be.
I mean, because here's a guy who makes, in my estimation, he makes really great music, and he'd be a great guy for you to reach out to and get to know. He's a really cool dude. He canoes. He's a photographer. He's got photographs of moose that I've never ever seen in National Geographic. I mean, close-ups of moose because he goes camping up in Algonquin Park.
Nice. Does he have
And
the moose playing cards picture?
I don't know, but I can tell you that he has a 6K movie camera that video was filmed on.
That's very impressive.
Yeah, I mean, and he's really into audio and video stuff like that. He's done he does really, really interesting John Denver covers,
Oh,
right?
yeah, I could see
And
that.
he's done all different kinds of artist covers on his YouTube channel. He's a really interesting dude, and I think that's how I found him. And he produces all of his stuff himself, but he's a drummer. That's another thing that you and him have in common. And I thought, would be a great thing for you to get to meet another drummer who's also a producer.
Yeah, for sure. I would. I like guys. The last month and a half, 2 months, I've been running into an awful lot of people who will pick any instrument up and become proficient on it in a very short. And when I say short period of time, I'm talking
Yeah.
like weeks. That always impresses me because my attention span. We always joke about attention span, but my attention span was only ever large enough to figure out my own instrument as best I
Well,
could.
I'm trying to get George to come on the show. He's a really quiet, reserved guy, and I really want to get him to come on the show because he's a multi-instrumentalist. He plays drums, he plays guitar, he plays mandolin, he plays so many different instruments that he's learned, and he's learned them. I think he even plays oboe.
Well,
You know,
That's one that you put that on your resume. Believe it or not, you will get calls because there's not a lot of people that actually play that instrument.
his daughter is also quite a singer, and she's done some duet work with him as well. And
Nice.
and there's actually a song of his that he did with his daughter that's on our stuff. So it's just really cool when you meet people like that, and you go, man, I could really get behind that music because here's somebody with a great deal of talent.
Yeah, no question.
Now we talk about songwriting. This was the post you made last week. It was made on your post, and it was about that Steve Beato video about 15 people writing a song. It's a song "We Pray," I think it's called, by Coldplay. But as I was telling you before the show, it doesn't even sound anything like Coldplay, which is
Yeah,
weird.
yeah.
Well,
I know different people that write in different sorts of things. So, like, there's the group that writes in Nashville that typically buy. Like, somebody will say, "Well, why does that stuff always sound the same?" Well, it's the same group of people that write songs and pitch them, and they pitch them to labels and artists and what have you. So, I don't. To be honest with you, I probably shared that just to see if it would drive any content. I didn't really watch that much of it, and the only reason is because I'm not a huge Rick fan. That's just me.
yeah.
Um, but I think that sometimes artists get to the point where they want to do that because they feel it's going to break them into another audience
Well,
that they're not into.
and everybody thinks that he's a guru because he's got 4 million subscribers. But subscribers, as you and I know, are not always engagers in your content.
No, and you know what? I will get myself in trouble by talking about Rick because I've been dealing with that all week. What I will say is he's a very smart individual.
Yep.
I'm told he's a great guitar player. I haven't spent a lot of time, studying him, but I'm told he's a great guitar player. Um, and he gets guests that
He's got
some
yeah,
of
he's
us
got
don't.
some, and he shares some great insights on his shows. I mean, what I was saying is that somebody said, can't could 4 million people be wrong, right? And the thing is like I said, it depends on how many people engage with the content, and everybody's going to have their own viewpoint of what he's saying anyway. Does it
Yep.
take 15? I don't think it takes 15 people to write a song. A lot of collaborators, people that collaborate, it's two people. Michelle does her writing with Mark.
It's just her and Mark, and every now and again she'll. Well, so here's the thing that's going on with her that's very interesting is she will get people that'll be like, "Hey, would you listen to this and give me some feedback?" And she's very good at that. And you're going to probably see her turn up on various writing credits because the thing that people don't know about her, she's an amazing lyricist. I mean, she used to write books, right? So and people have been getting drawn to that, which is great. Having 15 people work on a tune, I mean, hey, if it works, great. And I guess you're rolling the dice that without knowing what the financial setup of that is. I guess you're rolling the dice that it's going to be a huge hit, and you're going to be dividing that 15, slicing the pie 15 different
Well,
ways.
and nobody knows, does somebody get 1%? Does somebody get
Right.
2%? Are they getting percentage of the writing credits? Are they also involved in the recording process? I mean, there are royalties that could be shared out potentially among several people. Now, maybe it was just an idea as a collaborative process. Do you remember they used to have those online concerts where you'd have a musician in India and somebody in Africa and somebody in another country? Do you ever seen those videos?
Yep, and you still see them every now and again.
Yeah.
There was a ton of those things happening when COVID was going on.
Yeah,
So
and they're
yeah,
and they're collaborative processes. So this isn't kind of unlike those collaborative kind of processes where you might have several cooks in the kitchen.
yeah, and I mean, I'm I'm of the mindset now where the arguing with people about what's good and what's bad to me is over. Here's the thing: if you like it and it means something to you, right on. And here's where we're going to agree. What we're going to do is I'm going to promise you that I might say I don't like it, and I'll just leave it at that, and you do the same. What happens with me is there's too much kiss in my feed. Well, then stop following me because there's going to
What
be a
was
lot of
really
kiss.
interesting, I listened to the whole song in its entirety as well,
Yep.
right? And what struck me most is first and foremost, it was way, way off the charts from the normal formula of writing that Coldplay does.
Right.
I know you're not a Coldplay guy, and neither am I, but my wife does follow the band. And I know how they write. This was nothing like they normally write or produce, right?
Mhm.
And then when I listened to it, it had so many genres in it, it sounded like a dog's breakfast to me.
My buddy Greg Chase on 10 pounds of bologna in a 2-pound bag, right?
Yeah, it was too much stimulation for me. Some people might really dig it, but I just found it too overstimulating. Now, maybe if I smoked a doobie and listened to it, maybe I'd have a different mindset. I don't know.
Well,
Right?
I mean, a number of years ago, Pat Boone did In a Metal Mood, and he did a version of
Yes.
Crazy Train,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, somebody's
And you
gonna.
got
I guess it appeals to somebody.
Yeah, and you got Johnny Cash who did a whole bunch of stuff like that as well.
He did Rusty Cage by Soundgarden, and yeah,
Yeah,
for
he
sure.
did a whole bunch of different obscure tunes that were
Yeah.
just, really different and off the wall. So we're going to switch gears here for a second. I was just trying to find another. I wanted to see if I could find a photograph of George's studio because I wanted to share. Maybe he's got it in these posts here. I was just going to try and take a look here. And look at you got to look at the machinery that this guy has. I just want to show a couple of things here because when he pulls out one of his guitars, it just sort of makes me drool, and I go, "Oh my God, really? You got one of those?" So I'll just share this. Can you see that?
Yeah, that's very nice.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It looks like to me, it looks like a Gretsch from here, but I can't tell. But I'm sure with him, it's the real deal, man. He's an interesting dude, and I was going to see if I could find. There was pictures of his studio. That was his old studio,
Oh,
in
yeah.
his old house.
Yep.
But this guy has always built really professional, great studios, and when the quality of the music that I get from him is like some of the best produced stuff. He does all of the mixing, all of the mastering himself, which that's really cool when somebody can do all that stuff in house.
Mm-hmm.
Because it removes an awful lot of cost associated with producing one's music.
No, indeed it does.
Yeah. So he's got a studio there. He's offered for me to come up there. Him and I've never met face to face. He's offered for me to come up there and spend a couple of days and check out his studio and hang with him. So I may take him up on that offer, and we'll see. Maybe we'll film some of that and put it on the show. But there was another post that came up on Facebook, and I found it. Yes, you shared it, but I also found it because it came up in my feed, right? And I'm not as active as you are during the day on here, so I probably missed it when it first came out. So I'm just going to pop it up here so I can read it off. You talked about this a little bit. So this was Michael Brandvold's post about being a musician, right? Musicians, 11 hard truths. Streaming is the best thing that ever happened to the music industry. You have more control than ever before. So everybody's got a different opinion on what that actually means.
Yep.
But here's the interesting thing. Before the advent of streaming services, the only way your music would ever likely get heard is if you got picked up by a major record label.
Yep.
Right? That was the only way your music would likely get heard, other than if you were sending demo tapes into people and stuff like that. And there was a conversation the other night about Kate Bush.
Mm-hmm.
And how she became famous. Do you know that her first 50 songs that she sent out as demos got rejected by every record label?
I didn't know that, but it doesn't surprise me. Not because it's her or whatever, but the thing that a lot of people don't realize, and I know this from talking, and you would know this, but from just talking to people, a lot of people that sit around boardroom tables that are analyzing this stuff aren't musicians. They're business people.
No, that's right.
And they're going, okay, is this going to resonate with the public? And a lot of times they don't know. And sometimes somebody gets signed because they might be looking to lose money on a particular thing, or sometimes people get signed because they want a blockbuster, and you never know where a particular artist is going to land and fall based upon a formula that these guys are using, right? So that
Right.
doesn't surprise me, because she also was coming up in a time where, women unfortunately were overlooked unless they were a certain thing. So yeah,
But I mean, here's an interesting thing. She never would have got found if it wasn't for a friend of the family that knew David Gilmour.
yeah,
David Gilmour heard her music, and he paid for her to get 3 songs
hmm
made into a demo, and that's when she got signed to a major label.
yep.
So that goes back to that whole thing of who you know.
Well, that's a huge part of it, and
Or
and
3
and
Degrees of Kevin Bacon.
it's a huge part of it. And one of the things that I get lit up last week or the week before, because they were talking about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and a friend of mine put a post up and basically said, "Oh, Wolfgang Van Halen has officially surpassed his father," and I'm like, this is not even worth my time or energy.
I
That's
know that
just,
one drove you nuts, say.
well, because here's the thing: obviously there's no Wolfgang Van Halen if there was no Eddie. Eddie was a generational dude. I'm not
Well,
even a guitar player, and I would argue if his brother was in any other band but Van Halen, Alex would be a generational drummer. Like, that's who they were, right? And this is so. My point is, you know, he is the spawn of a generational dude. He got to go be around a generational dude and learn from a generational dude, but he also had doors open for him. So Eddie was the guy that had to do it on his own and forge a path.
yep,
And this
yep.
is where all this stuff gets messed up, right? So to say that, I stayed out of it, but it was just like, here's my statement. As far as I'm concerned, you're wrong, but that's your opinion, so have it. And then it was like, you don't
Well,
like Wolfgang. It's like, yeah, you know what? That's
here's another point of view though. And I saw him open for Metallica last year. And I liked him. And
yeah, that's fine.
I liked him because he's a hell of a guitar player, but he can also sing very well.
So riddle me this.
Huh.
If he was Wolfgang Smith from Boise, Idaho. No,
Well,
no, listen to me
I'm
for a
not
second.
arguing, but you already made the point of that, and I agree with you 100% that
But
that
here's
Eddie
the thing.
that
What
his pedigree gave him a leg up. But here's the thing: he still had to work at that craft to get good.
fair, but he is the prototypical example of everything that doesn't get signed typically by a record label,
Yeah,
right?
I
He's
know.
an overweight dude
Yep.
who, he's like, I should be going, this is amazing, because he's taking all these things that are typically overlooked and he's breaking through them. And if he was Wolfgang Smith from Boise, Idaho, I would probably embrace it. But it's there's a little bit of this whole fanism piece that kind of overlooks the fact that, and this is a me thing, don't get me wrong. But there's absolutely nothing that he does for me personally or whatever. But that's not to say other people can't like him or do like him or whatever. That's just my
Yeah,
point of view.
and you got to remember business decisions of music record companies like BMG who signed him,
Yeah.
right? They've they've got a business model to uphold. And it's not just about the music anymore. It's entertainment as well. You know, my nephew and I had this conversation about the NFL not long ago, that it's more entertainment than it is sports anymore.
My viewpoint on everything, and I mean everything, was changed about 3 weeks ago when I watched the documentary on Vince McMahon.
I'll have to watch that one. Where's that?
Well,
Where do we
it's
find
on
that one, my friend?
Netflix. It's on
Okay.
Netflix, and everybody around him said what deplorable things that he did, and nobody went against him because they all wanted fame and fortune. And my whole thing about that was, what's your soul worth? And I got to see it in that document. It actually creeped me out.
Right.
It affected me in a very negative way for about 3 days, and I'm not even kidding.
Well, I think we have the opportunity now to pick and choose from my end now what streaming services I'm going to upload to, or which ones I'm going to avoid anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So if an artist says to me, I don't want to upload on this certain particular service,
Mm-hmm.
then we'll endeavor to either get it put up on that, not put up on that service, or have it pulled down off that service.
Yeah.
So I mean, we're really, really, it's about supporting the artist and what they believe. I'm not here to try and convert anybody differently. If somebody says, you know what, I don't like XYZ streaming service, don't want to support it. That would be the same as somebody like, John Fogerty, who never wanted his music played by big oil companies.
Yeah, and I definitely get that. The thing for me that I guess is a little much is when, you know, 8 or 9 people, or 8 or 900, 8 or 9,000 lodge the same feedback or the same complaint about something, and it's either being ignored or it's not going to happen to me, so they don't do it. And then all of a sudden it happens to you, and everybody's supposed to care. You know what I mean? That
Yep.
drives me nuts, especially when, I've got a friend that used this analogy so many times, and I use it as, the analogy of walking across a minefield where, and I have walked across a minefield on my own so many times where you blow yourself to pieces.
Right.
Why don't you just find the person that did it and walk in their footsteps and get across safely? And I just don't
Right.
understand why people don't do that.
Right. We got Keith Hill tuning in from the Sioux area tonight. Thanks for joining us tonight,
Hey, Sault
Keith.
Ste. Marie. Love it.
Yeah, Deanbo Harnish
Deanbo got a new kitten.
and Kyle Alt. Thanks for joining us tonight, guys. Kyle Alt is another drummer, Sean,
Nice.
from Abaddon's End. They're down in the U.S.
Nice.
They follow the show regularly. They got I don't know how things are working out for them, but I know that they worked on putting out working with a they were working with a label.
Nice.
And they found a label that they were working with down there that they felt that worked for them. And I don't know if that's still happening or not. So, Kyle, you might want to comment on that tonight. You're more than welcome to. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of stuff. But one of the things I want to just touch base on really, really quickly is that this other thing. The whole thing is that if streaming had never happened the way that it did,
Mm-hmm.
it would never allow independent artists to get on any platform whatsoever. And with the advent of these aggregators, so we got DistroKid. Oh, I lost you there, Sean. Not sure what happened there. You come back in the room there. We put you back on the screen. There we go, brother.
I don't know what happened.
Something happened. So, I mean, here's the whole thing with this is that these people never would have had access to these platforms without these service coming along. So you got DistroKid, you got CD Baby, who actually started off making CDs, and then of course everything goes digital. And we've seen all the all the memes about sell a CD, sell vinyl. You're going to make more money than you're going to make off 5,000 streams, which is absolutely true.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, we're living more and more in a society where people want to carry their music digitally. There's lots of audiophiles out there who still want vinyl. There's lots of people out there who still want CDs, but I know a lot of indie bands who have a hard time pushing that media when people can just go to whatever streaming service and stream their music. Now, if they didn't put their music on a streaming service and went exclusively with, content, there's no way that people might find out about them. And for me, streaming services are as much about discovery as they are about making revenue. And when people are out on streaming services, you might find listeners who you might never have ever found because your music now is available all over the world. And we can find that in the analytics, and I can go to every single artist on our label, and I can tell you that people in countries that are listening to their music never would have heard them if their music wasn't up on a streaming platform. For example, you and I shared one time Michelle's stats, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where she had a lot of listeners over in China.
Yeah.
Right? Chinese people that never would have heard her music otherwise. They would never even know who she was if not for social media and not for the ability to stream music worldwide. So, whatever streaming service they found her on, she found a fan base there.
Oh, and there's pluses and there's minuses. There's no question.
Yeah. I mean, and like I said, I'm not trying to preach one over the other. And you can have a reasonable amount of control over theirs. I mean, there's a lot of things right, there's a lot of things wrong with them. And we're going to get into some of that tonight. I got a feeling we're half past the show, and I feel like we're just starting to scratch the surface here because we're only into the first truth here about streaming is the best thing that ever happened to the music industry. You have more control than ever before. The other point that I wanted to make in this regard is that these aggregators like CD Baby, who was one of the ones that started it all way back when it was physical copy. Then you've got other companies like TuneCore, and you've got DistroKid, and there's Ditto, and there's a couple of other ones that are aggregators. Then you have white label aggregators, which cost you money every time you get an upload, and we're talking serious money.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So they made it affordable for the average musician to be able to get their music out there somewhere. In order for them to gain access to those streaming platforms, they had to sign deals that favor the streaming platforms, that didn't favor them at all. And they have to abide by the rules of the streaming platforms and whoever the majority. And again, I don't know how these contracts are all come together because none of that information is public. Right? So nobody knows how this goes. But the way that I see streaming services is that they're a two-tiered system. If you're with a major record label, you're up here on this tier.
Yep.
And if you're anybody else, you're down on this tier. And the only way you're going to get up to this level is you're going to pay to get up onto that level.
Well, there's the age-old saying that applies to people who make decisions is good enough for thee, not enough for, or not good enough for me, right? And so we talked about this on text today. I'm an artist and I want to pay for streams. So say I pay $1,000 to make 25 cents. Is that bad? When the major labels, and I could prove this. I wouldn't do it on here.
I know what's happening.
I'll get releases all the time, and somebody will say, "Yeah, here's the new video by blah blah blah," and I'll open it up, and it's got 250,000 views on YouTube in 1 hour. That's not possible.
They have bot farms that are doing all of that.
Yep.
And this is not unlike. All of this stuff is not unlike payola. And payola existed way back when radio was first in its inception. When radio became the popular way for music to trend and for music to become hit stuff, right? The record companies realized that their influence was the disc jockeys.
Yep.
So they did all kinds of things for disc jockeys to get them to play their artist music. And it wasn't about how often they played it. It was how consistently they played it. And when they played it, probably when they had their most listeners, right? And they would pay them. And sometimes it was in the form of other types of payment. I heard bags of cocaine. I heard all kinds of other stories about what was given to disc jockeys back in the day to get them to play music. Right?
But isn't it interesting? The frontline person eventually gets in trouble for doing that, for receiving gifts or whatever. Yet my favorite band, and it's hilarious because I've got the solo albums thing over here on my wall.
Right.
When Kiss 46 years ago this week put out the solo albums, Neil Bogart had every single one of them shipped platinum before they even sold a single record. So the second they hit the record stores, they had a platinum album, all four of them. They didn't sell them. They weren't sold. He essentially bought them. And then that group of platinum records went and collected dust wherever, and then, but it was shipped platinum. So the appearance was, oh my God, this is such a desirable thing. And what ended up happening was people went out and bought them in droves because, oh my God, I
Right.
went platinum. That's what's happening now.
Well, I had a friend who used to work years for Sony Entertainment, and it wasn't unusual for major record labels when artists were on tour, seeding the audience with superfans.
No, I mean, once again, Kiss, one of the first 2 or 3 shows that they gave T-shirts to girls who stood in the front row with the Kiss logo on it.
That's right.
Hadn't played a gig yet. There was 50 girls in there wearing Kiss T-shirts. Like, what's up? You know, there's the Barnum and Bailey thing that I think is great, and where I think it gets so unfair and so not right, in my opinion, is when the majors can do it, it's perfectly fine. But an independent guy wants to do it, or an independent girl wants to do it, and she gets struck or he gets struck, and they get their tunes pulled down for essentially doing the very same thing that the big guys are doing. That's, in my opinion, is wrong.
Here's a comment from a musician that's been around a long time, Keith Hill. He goes way back to the Tall Band, and you can check out their stuff. Before CD Baby and the like, a band needed to get one of their tunes in a show or a video or some sort of media just to join SOCAN. Digital platforms did make it easier, and there's no doubt about it that they made it easier for people. But here's the thing: all these contracts are signed with these organizations, and even when Spotify wanted their catalog, before Spotify went live, they went, okay, no one's going to buy monthly subscriptions to our streaming service unless we have a massive catalog of music. So what do? They approach the big three, right? The big three record labels, and they say, we want to purchase your catalog of music, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they said, okay, this is what it's going to cost you, right? By the way, we want these special deals whenever we want to promote our artists on your platforms, right? And these become blanket contracts that go to all these streaming platforms that they have to agree to if they want the catalogs of music. Now, if you want a catalog of music and you want to give all of your subscribers a great deal of choice, are you not going to want those catalogs of music?
Well, I think you're gonna. Yeah, I mean, especially now, it's a necessity. There's no question.
Well, and it's a multi-billion-dollar business, not necessarily for the artists or the right holders,
No.
right? But for the shareholders invest in these companies. We've gone over this before, that most of these companies, Spotify, iTunes, Apple Music, Google Play, YouTube, they're not even owned by the companies that you think they're owned. They're owned by conglomerates, and you've got large investment corporations like BlackRock and Vanguard that own most of the shares in this. So these companies are shareholder owned. And oftentimes when something like this, there's always got to be a balance stricken. And I really feel like the pendulum swung the other way. They're looking at how they reward the shareholders rather than how they reward the people that are actually providing them with the fucking content in the first place.
That's fair, but I think somebody was smart enough to figure out. George Carlin used to have this great bit where he talked about the people at the top want to keep the people in the middle against each other, right? And if you look at that, that's happening to a T, because people get mad about it, and people, this is terrible, but why they keep doing it, because be impacted and left behind. But these guys they're going to do it anyway. So we're just going to do what we want to do until somebody does something to make them not do it. That's just what's going to happen, right? Deanbo had a great point. Keith Hill, before the online stuff gets created, how was it done for, say, a local band? How did we tell people we were going or playing it? So basically, I mean, in Halifax, I actually did an interview with a guy the other day. It works for a magazine here, that they used to post weekly who was playing, and that it was a cool thing. You would go in and you would see who was playing. Toronto used to have these directories for clubs, and and obviously nobody wants paper anymore. They want it online, and it's incredibly difficult to capture all that data. So people unfortunately don't do it to the level they used to.
So Keith Hill had a good answer to Deanbo. He says, back when I was touring, it was the bars who promoted the bands coming in, and it was the bands who were able to keep the crowd there. Nowadays, clubs expect bands to do it all.
So Keith's going to probably want to virtually punch me in the face. But I have this discussion with people all the time, and here it is. I get the sentiment of that. I do, because there used to be marketing budgets and clubs used to be able to take ads out. But I've always been in the thought of, I don't want to depend on somebody to do something for me when they might not do it. So therefore, I always did it, and I will do it all only because I'm used to people letting me down. So therefore, I don't have a problem with it. Now I still get that, and it typically, is followed up by, and I don't know Keith, so it's not directed at him, but typically, it'll follow up, but I'm old school, and I get the old school thing, but unfortunately, that just doesn't.
I would really like to see how I would really like to see a model move more towards where the venue owner and the artist come together with some sort of marketing plan that they're gonna use to promote these shows, because I really think that if you come at it from a partnership approach, it becomes more of a win-win situation.
It
Right?
does. No, I don't know how it works up there, but if I take, and Keith, I'm on board with you, man, because that's exactly how I remember. I didn't do anything but buy the local paper and hope to see my band's name in there when I was playing. So I get it. Um, the problem with that here, there's a few things. So one, there's so much interference, so much regulation, so much frankly nonsense, that bars have a hard enough time just keeping the lights on, let alone doing that. And they also deal with, okay, well, here's what we're going to pay. And a band will take, or a performer will take the money, but then get a better gig and sub the original one out. So there's that. But on the flip side, venues are sometimes guilty of taking the guy for 50 less bucks or 100 less bucks a night, thinking they're getting the same form of entertainment. So you got to break that to get your partnership. That's your first kind of mile marker to get it done, right?
Yeah, yeah. Here's an interesting one that is the second truth. We're going to get to the second truth, but we're not going to get all 11 tonight. Short form content isn't going anywhere. It's a number one discovery for music. So short form content is really good stuff. I'm talking about reels.
Yeah.
Right? I'm talking about video shorts on YouTube. And one of the things that I find, and Keith says he takes no offense to your comments at all, Sean.
Well, he said back in the day, bands carry production and crew, and he's 100% right. And I can tell you that we used to travel around Atlanta, Canada, and we'd have two crew guys and one of the band members in the middle, and we used to make a little sort of cubby in the back in the cube van between the PA, and that's how we traveled around. And I was used to my sound man and my light man making more money than me each and every week, and that's just the way that it was back then. And we had huge PA, so he's 100% correct. Back to what you're talking about. Yes, I talk about this all the time with people when I interview them. I keep telling them the interview is going to be short because that's where people's attention spans are. And I wasn't a believer until Jason McCorson started doing these reels for me. And we would release something, and all of a sudden we're getting 7,000 views, or we're getting 15,000 views, and it's a 15-second reel. And I'm going, maybe that is the way, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because I'm always after artists on the label. I said you should be putting out at least one reel a week. You're rehearsing once a week. So what would it take for you to make a 20-second or 30-second short, right? A selfie while you're at the rehearsal talking about what you're working on, giving your followers an update about where you are, and then in the background using your own music on that reel, because we publish all your music on Facebook and Instagram, that you can use that music on your own reel. Now you can put your own music in the background with you talking over about it, what you're doing. And you could do this as a weekly engagement process with your followers. Wouldn't that be a great thing to do?
It was, but you know what we as musicians get hung up on, and I actually don't. I take a lot of grief for this, but that's fine. All of the sound wasn't great. All the lighting was crappy. You know what? All
Who
the things,
cares?
but all the things people don't care about that musicians do, and they don't do it because they look for things to be perfect. Like Barstools and Band Talk on my side of the camera, up until last year, was shot on an iPhone 7.
It's interesting. I do reels every week for the show, as you know,
Yep.
right? And every week I get a different number of views, but I've got ones that are still trending. I've got ones that have over 5,000 views now,
Yep.
right? And they're not even relevant anymore. But I found that people are going back and watching the show. So because those reels are still trending all over Facebook, people are more aware of the show, and I start seeing watches going up on past shows that we've got posted to Facebook. All of a sudden the numbers will jump by 4 or 5, 10, views.
Yep.
Because now we got more people who are actually going there and finding it and realizing that they're right on my profile.
Yep. Deanbo again. So there's a local band that was together for quite a while, and they played their last show last weekend. And essentially, Brent says, we'll get back in a second to Brent. But essentially what he was saying was this band's final show was on the Bright Lights, and so people knew about it, but other bands of maybe lesser experience or are not as well known don't get that. And I'm not going to say all venues, but I firmly believe sometimes venues will do that on purpose to try to say, oh, well, you didn't draw, so we're going to get you for less money.
Right.
So, the simple fact of the matter is, at least out here, people go with something they recognize before they'll go with something they want to try.
Right. Here's an interesting thing. So you can actually do what Brent is suggesting here. He says reels are difficult to create without a smartphone, and I don't own one. And he says, "Hey Keith, how's it going?" Of course, those guys know each other back from the days of touring, but you can actually make video shorts and post them to your channel, to your page on Facebook. And you can cross post it to your Instagram, right? You can do video shorts, and you can still do a video short and post it to your profile. It'll still trend in a certain way. And you can just do a video short talking about what you're doing, playing your own music in the background.
Yep, you can.
Right. And the thing is, if Facebook or Instagram doesn't recognize it, now what happens a lot of times now that I find when I play our artist music on here, it just wants me to share the revenue. If there's ad revenue to be made off the track, well, guess what? We own it all. It goes back to our publishing company. So the cool thing about it now is that Facebook and Instagram have finally figured out the licensing thing. So all you have to do is go on it where it says it's muted you in some countries or whatever. And if you say, yeah, I'll share it with the rights owner, it goes back to our publishing company. So even if you use your own music and it's published through TUNZ Records, we're going to get the royalties back on those plays for you on your behalf. So what a great way to do that, eh?
No, absolutely. And I mean, they're effective. They are.
It's Brent Durner. He's posted in the chat room. If you saw it on screen there, Keith, that's where he says, "Hey, Keith," right there. But yeah, I mean, there's a whole lot of different things. Now we're like 6 minutes to the top of the show. We're not going to get all this tonight, but here's another one. The music industry is easier than it's ever been. Social media has opened up a global world. Well, that is a good truth because there's absolutely 100% truth in that statement.
Yeah, you can't, it is what it is.
Like I said before, we have streaming services now where artists' music can be heard in countries that they've never been heard in before, which I think is absolutely, cool that can happen. I'm just going to give you an example here really, really quick how that works. And I'm going to go quickly to our Spotify for artists. I'm just going to pick an artist at random. And this is a prog rock band. So, Sean, not one of your favorite genres, but I just want to talk about the audience and where people are listening to their music from. And that's the part that I think is really, really cool. So we've got listeners in Finland, right? Their number one listeners are in Finland. Is there a surprise there?
Nope.
No. And the second most listened country is Canada, followed by the United States, Poland, Spain, Italy, United Kingdom, Germany, France, Australia, Argentina, Sweden, Mexico, Austria, Bulgaria. Now, if their music wasn't on a streaming service, people in those countries might likely never hear their music.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I'm speaking of Visions of Morpheus.
Yep.
Very well produced music. I'm trying to get Jeff to come on the show, because he is another self producer. He produces their videos, and he also produces all their music.
Brent, it seems there are more creators than there are listeners. You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
You may not be wrong. Here's the whole thing. And here's another thing that's really different about the music industry nowadays than it was. And Brent will attest to this, and I'm sure Keith will as well. Back when we were kids and teenagers back in the 70s, if you were in a band, it was a rarity. It was also sometimes rare for you to even have a friend also that was in a band. If you might be the only band in your high school.
Yep.
Now you're maybe one of 10 or 12 bands in your high school.
Well, I mean, and I think lately you can take that and thank the whole COVID thing for it, because people started learning how to play instruments, and then they got halfway decent, and then they go out and they start playing, and they're playing where they never would have got an opportunity before. But I've said this before: just because somebody is good, I had a conversation with a guy. Yeah, well, we got this guy. He's just as good as all the other guys, and he's $100 cheaper. I said, yeah, but he's also the guy that will call you 2 hours before because he's going to go to a Super Bowl party and not do your gig, because he's not doing it for real. He's doing it for a hobby. And until that happens, people won't take you at your word until it happens. And lo and behold.
Now here's an interesting thing. A young fellow I tried at one point to get on our record label. He's a hip hop rap guy who started doing hip hop and rap, recording it in his closet in his parents' home.
Uh-huh.
Right. And then he graduated and started, recording music in Toronto, and he's done work with The Weeknd.
Mm-hmm.
So he, here's somebody who became very creative just by doing something in a closet in his parents' home. That's where he started recording vocals and started doing rap and sending out demos to different people. And that's how, different artists heard him and said, hey, we want to do collabs with you. And so he's collaborated with The Weeknd, and which I think is really, really cool. And other artists in the Toronto area. I think he's actually living in Toronto now because he's have more access to other artists that he can collab with, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's really, really, really interesting that Brent makes that observation. There are more creators than listeners, because
it's not wrong.
He's not wrong. In fact, if you look at the number of artists that have gone up from registering on SOCAN, right? It's in the hundreds of thousands.
Yeah.
Right. It used to be, I think at one point when I first started doing this in 2016, worldwide between like SOCAN, I think between SOCAN, CSAC, what are the other two? BMI and ASCAP. Between all those performance rights organizations, there were something like about 700,000 artists worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
That number is like quadrupled now. Right?
Yeah, I mean,
well, I know of 35 artists on our record label whose music is all registered in the right places now because of the work we've done with them.
Absolutely. But, on the one hand, it's smart. On the other hand, though, music, unfortunately, to me, has just become this thing that it's a bit of a platitude when people, to me, this is just to me, when somebody says it's so important, well, is it? Because it's not treated that way. And a friend of mine used this example. Why is it when there's a house party going on, they don't ask the lawyer to bring divorce documents that you can practice doing, or the accountant to bring spreadsheets. They ask the musician to bring his guitar so they can sit around and sing, right?
Right.
And so it's it's still thought of that. It's an afterthought. It's the first thing to go, and but that it's also the first thing that everybody says, man, if we don't have it, life's going to be terrible.
That's
Um,
right.
so I mean, it's a good thing that people are registering their music, but it's kind of like, it kind of tells you, I guess, a little bit that there's maybe not more creators and listeners. I don't know,
Well,
or there are.
and some of it is just minutia as well, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you've got to be discriminating. I mean that's that being said, we're going to bait people for next week's show, and we're going to talk about this. Try to get this done in a minute and a half, so we're finished here shortly after the first period of overtime.
Can I
But
just can I make
yeah,
one quick comment?
yeah,
So we are one of the things that we started doing on Barstools and Band Talk, and we started it last year. Um, we came up with an award. It's called the Ed Levick Side Hustler Volunteer of the Year Award, and we give it away to volunteers. And it's basically people who always show up or never ask, over deliver, under promise. And it was named after a good friend of mine, and actually somebody that helped Michelle when she first started getting going. His name was Ed Levick, and Ed was working on a project for he became a school bus driver. He was working on a project for a young man who had cancer, and when Ed died, we took that on and had 2 events in his memory and raised money for the young man. So anyway, we're giving it away in Ed's name. And last year we gave it to a couple of very good friends, Tony Croft and Melissa Now. And this year we just announced it's going to Chantel Lee, who is a local metal promoter here, but she also volunteers her time with animals and people's causes and all that stuff. And Stephen Ruxton, who is a legendary photographer. And I want to get that shout out about them, because anybody that is watching this knows that they're very deserving. And so I've done that. Thank you.
yeah. Actually, Brent came up with this idea, and we were going to do something for Indie Tunes as well, as an award as well. We wanted to award our own gold and platinum records to artists
Oh, that's
on
cool.
on the label.
Yeah.
So I've been investigating the cost of these, right?
Yep.
So to get the whole thing put in a picture box, kind of like a gold record or a platinum record would be, the cheapest price I've gotten quoted to me so far per unit is $249.
Yeah. Or there's other ways you can do it, because at the end of the day, it's not necessarily about the hardware, but the thought. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Brent said he would pay for one of his own to have the Indie Tunes logo on a gold record. He thought that would be kind of cool.
Well, see that he's different people, right?
No doubt, no doubt. But maybe he might set a trend. I mean, if he was the first artist on the label to purchase his own award, because we aren't a big budget label. We don't have the money to give $249 awards away to everybody that reaches gold. And we've got a lot of artists on the label that have over 50,000 streams, including a good friend of yours, Michelle Ryder.
Yeah, I know. And my last little piece that I want to say, because we didn't cover it, but we covered it online, is I'm not going to mention any names, other than, don't wait for something to happen to you to think that something isn't going on, because all I can tell you is, when it happens to you, it may just be too late to have anything to be done about it. And
Well,
we're
gonna talk next week about that whole, getting dinged for fraudulent streams on your music, when we know that there are others out there that are getting away with it.
No question there is. And yeah, anyway, we don't need to go there, but that's my only point. And again, Brent Durner has gone through some stuff in the business, and I've talked to him about it, that if it happened to me and I acted like it was the first time it ever happened in the history of the world, I would expect him to drive down here, jump on a plane, and punch me square in the nose. Right? That's me. But when stuff happens, there's information out there, and there's this propensity now in the music business to not share info and do it on your own and try to prove that you're better than everybody else. So when you do, you can look back and go, look at me. And you don't need to do that, because people that really care about this business will help you.
Well, we're gonna talk about that next week, about the whole promotion scam thing that goes on services asking artists to do promotion for themselves, and all these other things that become tempting in terms of becoming relative. But it all goes to this whole business of payola, and we're going to get into that more, because I believe that payola still exists. It's just in a different form. It's used in a different manner. We're going to talk about that as we continue on these 11 truths posted by Michael Brandvold. I think was a great idea. Who knows? Maybe I should invite him on a future show, and we'll maybe have him help.
He's going through. So he was away. He was tending to something with his daughter, and his two sidekicks they got in some hot water where they made the comment that Eric Singer is a far better drummer than Eric Carr, and things like that. And anyway, and Bruce Kulick, who former Kiss guitar player, got involved. And they did a show last week that was absolutely hilarious, because it was like two kids that the parents went away and they had the house party and got caught. It was absolutely hilarious. And and Michael knows his stuff, man. End of story.
Yeah, so maybe we'll have him come back on the show to do a wrap-up on this whole series. Yeah. So next week, we're going to continue with the 11 hard truths of being a musician or being an artist. We're going to talk about things like, fake streaming and what that means, and some of these scams that are out there regarding, getting your on these playlists, getting on Spotify playlists, and these bot farms that actually get you fake streams, which really in some ways doesn't help you, and yet in other ways it does. And we'll talk about how that works and how the major record labels actually use that to their advantage. We'll talk about that all next week. But remember, this has been the Indie Show. Sean McKenna from the podcast Barstools and Band Talk, Rim Shots with Sean. Check him out on YouTube and subscribe to his channel. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. We got new video up there all the time. Of course, the video of this show every week, as well as new content. George's video is going to go up this Sunday, so check it out. Give it a like, and send him a message and say, hey, we like what you're doing. Encourage him to do more work.